Hey everyone, welcome Azure Cosmos DB Live TV. Welcome back. Happy New Year. This is our first episode of the year. I'm your host, Mark Brown, and great to have you back with us. I got a special guest this week, Vincent-Philippe Lauzon from the Azure Data Explorer, or formerly known as Kusto team, I guess. Do you guys still talk like that? Do you still use that word?
Internally, we throw a Kusto around all the time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's true. So great to have you on this week, and definitely great to have you for our first episode back. We took about a 6-week break, actually a little more than that, right before Thanksgiving holidays. So good to have you on, and good to lead with this episode and this topic. I am not shy to admit that one of my favorite databases is Kusto, or Azure Data Explorer, as it were. There's a lot of great things to love about it. Its capabilities, the language of it is just super fascinating and powerful. You can do just so many things with that thing. Great as a time series. I think for a lot of people who know, we use it internally at Microsoft for a lot of our telemetry for Azure. Customers who have used log analytics know Kusto or this language as well, because that's how we expose all of our user logs or all the log analytics and stuff in there. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about a brand new connector that we've released for connecting Azure Cosmos DB to Azure Data Explorer.
Exactly. Thank you, Mark. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. We released that just before Christmas. We released the new Cosmos DB to Azure Data Explorer Synapse link, which is like a huge mouthful, but basically a new data connection we have in Azure Data Explorer, so that you can ingest data coming from Cosmos DB in a managed way, so that you just connect and then Kusto platform takes care of the rest.
So kind of conceptually walk me through how it connects. So is this connector talking to our OLTP or our row store, or is it talking to the analytical store?
It's talking to the row store. It's using the change feed feature on Cosmos DB side.
Okay.
So that's why we can ingest in near real time. So because when Cosmos DB writes a document, it's available on the change feed right away. So if you use something called streaming ingestion on ADX, that's how you get the lowest latency possible. Then you can get to sub-second latency. So as soon as you write a document, it's available in ADX.
So change feed coming out of us and then into your streaming endpoint, I guess, and Kusto, and then straight into a cluster, basically, from there, right?
Exactly. So from there, it's like any other connections in Azure Data Explorer. You use a data mapping to map a JSON document to a table in Kusto, and then the rest is history. You get your data, and you can do analytics on it.
I got lots of questions, but I want to let you get started here. I'm sure, and folks, if you got questions too, feel free to ask. I may ask your question, but if I don't, let me know in the chat here, and then we'll ask the question here. So,
before I start the demo, maybe just contrasting the two technologies.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of Cosmos DB as well. I've been using Cosmos DB since 2015. I think just before you guys went GA, so when it was public preview, I used that. When I think about Cosmos DB, when I talk about it to my colleagues, the two big stereotype workloads I give is like a website where you have like hundreds of thousands of people hitting the website and hitting, maybe my profile or my high scores or something. So lots of concurrency. Simple queries. So you usually narrow it down to a micro partition, and then you hit that. And I think you're the only service to have an SLA on the latency of a query, if I'm not mistaken. Very
not
fast.
the queries, but the reads and writes. So point reads and inserts.
All right.
Yeah.
And so that's one. The other one is IoT, where you have tons of devices throwing data at Cosmos DB. And I'm one of the users, and on my cell phone, I want to know if my garage door is open or what's the status of this or that. And again, lots of concurrency, simple queries, but very fast. If you contrast that with ADX, ADX is analytical instead of transactional. What does that mean? It means that typically a query will be more complex, will scan a lot of data and do aggregations on the data. So the optimization won't talk about the nuts and bolts today, but the optimization on both technologies are very different, and that's why I think they complement each other very well.
The underlying storage is a column store, correct, for ADX?
Correct. Yeah, we do have a row store. So when we do streaming ingestion, we do have a row store. So that's why we got this this low latency and high throughput. But yeah, otherwise it's a column store so that we can achieve high speed aggregation. Also, it offers better compression.
When you do the ingestion and you go, so you have both stores in, like in Cosmos with Synapse Link, we have both. We store data twice. It's basically stored as a row store and then stored in a column store. Mm-hmm. Do you guys do you have a similar pattern in how you do that? And
it's kind of an anti-chamber. So when you use streaming ingestion, so you don't have to use streaming ingestion by default. ADX doesn't use streaming ingestion; it uses batch ingestion, and so it ingests a batch of data and push it directly in the column store. If you use streaming ingestion, we pass it into a row store that acts as a buffer. And once in a while, that's done automatically by the platform. We'll take a bunch of rows and migrate it to the column store.
Oh, I see. And then it just basically flushes it out.
Yeah, otherwise it's not efficient because you need to index and compress the data to push it to the column store. So if you have like 5 rows, it doesn't make sense to do that. You don't get much compression.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So yeah, so that's why those two complement each other so well. And I think you get best of both worlds using both. Today I'm going to do a demo with using the Bixi data set that I found on a public website thanks to your help. Bixi is a public service in Montreal, which is my hometown. It's a bicycle sharing service. So you go to, there's like bike racks everywhere in the city. You go with your credit card, you pick a bike, you take a ride, and you drop it at another station. And that's the story of it. So now I'm going to just start pushing data to Cosmos DB. So I'm going to push data to Cosmos DB and
in the wintertime, do these guys rent skis by chance? Because riding a bike around Montreal in the winter is dangerous.
That's a good point. If I get enough data and if I get more than 1 year, you'll see there's a big dip during winter.
I've been there in the winter. I picked a really bad week. It was like an ice storm that week, and there was there was like death ice crystals hanging from the power lines. You just did not want to
you don't want to be below that. Yeah. There's still a couple of people like messengers, I think, in the downtown are still using bikes in the winter, but I certainly don't. So assuming that this is working, I'll show you. So this is my Cosmos DB environment. No, my Cosmos DB is over here, and here I'm going to show you. First, what if one of your audience member maybe don't know Azure Data Explorer? As you mentioned, it's the technology under Azure Monitor, Azure Log Analytics, Azure App Insights, and Azure Sentinel, and a couple of other first parties as well at Microsoft. And it's exceptionally good at doing analytics and at doing analytics on structured data like tables and columns, semi-structured like JSON. So we do index JSON. We don't index everything by default. Actually, there's no opt-out. We index everything. And non-structured data, so textual data. That's why it's so good with log. So if you have, say, billions of rows and you want to find a pattern of, null exception in there, it can find it under a second.
Especially with dates too, right? Like Kusto's an exceptional time series database as well. You know what? Funny side fact. I was just hanging out on Twitter yesterday, which is kind of what I do most of the time, and someone tweeted out this like little handy graph that had all the mappings of the different service providers, as well as like an on-prem option for all these different patterns, whether it was, document stores or column stores or key value pairs. And they had different databases from like AWS, Azure, GCP, and then like an on-prem type of thing. And for Azure and time series, they had Cosmos. And I tweeted it back to the guy, or I don't know if I retweeted or not, but I just said, hey, that's wrong. Actually, we're not a time series database. That's you guys. I would put Kusto in there or ADX in there versus us. So anyway, just if people are confused, because I get this question from time to time, Cosmos is not a time series database, but you guys are. So
yeah, we optimize by time, we partition by time, and we have a bunch of primitives to analyze time series like fast Fourier transforms and that type of thing. So if you would like to try that, I gave you the link for the free cluster. Unfortunately, the Cosmos DB connection doesn't work with free cluster yet. Maybe in 1 or 2 months, we'll have the experience to provision one there. But now what you can do is you can create a cluster. So if you're in a resource group,
I'll stick up the free cluster anyway if people want to.
yeah, it's a great way. It's a great way to start. You get 100 gigabytes of data for free. So
and you guys got some great getting started templates and other things in there. I definitely recommend, even if you don't use this connector, to check it out and try the free experience there and just see what you can do with it, because it is a really powerful database. So.
And there's the Kusto Detective Agency as well. We I think I shared a link with that as well. It's kind of a gamification to learn Kusto. Like you have different inquiries that you'll do as a detective to find stuff in the data. So
I don't know if I've got that link or not, but yeah, we'll send that one here.
Kusto Agency. So let's say I want to create a Kusto container. I don't call it Kusto. I'll call it Data Explorer. You search that in the marketplace and you provision it like any other service. I'll just show you quickly the form. So that's, let's say, a resource group. You give a cluster name that has to be unique because it's going to be bound to a DNS. ADX right now is a single tenant experience. We're thinking about moving and having like a multi-tenant experience, like a server, more or less serverless base. But right now, when you provision Kusto or ADX, Azure Data Explorer, you provision a cluster, so it's yours. And you can do whatever you want with it. So you give it a name, you choose the region, obviously. Then you choose the type of workload. I suggest you start with dev test as the cheapest option, and it comes with only one instance. And you actually don't pay for the service when you do that. So it's the cheapest way to start because cheapest SKU available. And
is
then
that
you
free
can,
forever? That's free forever, right? With you
yeah,
guys?
yeah. You can. It's not like you pay for the VMs, but you pay the same price as if you would be using VMs on Azure, the equivalent of VMs. We just charge you for the
Okay. So you're just paying for the
infrastructure.
compute.
Yeah. For the free cluster that we talked about, that's free forever, and it's free. And you can graduate. So you can start with a free cluster and just invest in the data. And if you say, maybe you start a business or something and you want to migrate to production with a real cluster with a real SLA, then you can promote your cluster. There's a path to that.
Okay.
So let's say and then it takes a little while to create. So I created my cluster beforehand. Let me just check that my data is getting into Cosmos DB. That's great. So that's my cluster. As you can see, it's a dev cluster, no SLA because it's only one node. If you want to have an SLA, you need 2 nodes. And what you're going to see today, the performance you're going to see is with the smallest possible cluster we have on the market. So if you want anything faster than that, just take a bigger cluster. If you want to go to production with an SLA, you'll need to have 2 instances anyway, so you'll get a performance boost right away. ADX, it's a scale-out architecture, so it's a cluster. You can go up to 1,000 nodes, and you can have very big nodes if you want to, with a lot of SSD drive on them. But yeah, so when you want to scale, there's always space to scale. And when you want to get started, the best way to do that, you come here and you want to ingest data, create data connection, and we're going to start here. But before I fill that, so that's my sort of forms to create a database, data connection in Cosmos DB. Actually, let me fill that.
Sure.
So I'm going to select my account. So that's my account and my subscription. I'm going to select the database. You'll see that the names are super original, main and Big C, that's the name of the service. So that's on the Cosmos DB side. So I selected a container. Now I'm going to select a table in Kusto, which I pre-provision. So I have a table called Big C Lending, and I have a mapping with it. I'm going to show that to you after a couple of
I have a question about mapping. So
yeah,
go ahead. After you're done, I want to. I just have a question. So, you want me to ask it now?
Yeah, sure.
So, so how do you handle hierarchies? Like, of course, JSON documents have a hierarchy, but Kusto is columnar.
Yeah.
What are you doing with that data? Are you doing like a make set in there, or what to handle?
Yeah, so there are multiple ways to handle it. The data set I'm going to show you, it has. Well, actually, let me show that to you.
Let me just show me. That's why I should wait. How did you do that? That's the question, right? So, okay.
Let's go in Cosmos DB. So those are the documents that I fetched. This is a bit going around because I basically took a bunch of Parquet files and I'm loading them and pushing them to Cosmos DB. Then I push that through the connector to ADX. So that's how a document looks like. Now my resolution is so low that we don't see everything, but you got the ID. That's a partition that is just an artificial partition.
Yeah.
Then I got some data. So under start, I got the start date in Linux long integer format, the station where it started. Same thing for the endpoint. So that's
good.
where
So you got embedded objects, and then it looks like an array. It looks like a little
exactly. So
there.
here I put like this is rubbish data. That's our artificial data I just generated to have an array. So the decision I took when I did my mapping is that I'm mapping that to a column, that to a column, that to a column, and that to a column. So I'm taking the entire array, pushing that as a JSON document inside a column, as we can do, and I'll show you what.
So you basically just packed a column with a bunch of JSON data is how you handled that array.
Correct. And there are different things you can do after that. You could unpack that to you could have like an MV expand, like a multi-value expand, where you can have one row per dose and like duplicating all your data. And I'll show you how we can do that. And then that's about it. Yeah, there's a is member value as well. We'll play with it. But let me go back here and finish this thing. So yeah, so that's the form. And at the end, there are two last things. So we use AAD authentication to connect the cluster to Cosmos DB. So two things: you need your cluster. So the traffic goes. The data goes from Cosmos DB to ADX, but the traffic goes from ADX to Cosmos DB. So it's ADX talking to the change feed of Cosmos DB. So you need a line of sight in terms of networking. So if you have a private endpoint on Cosmos DB, you need to have a managed private endpoint in ADX. I won't do that today, but we definitely support that. And you need your cluster to have access to have like the right and privilege to talk to it. The wizard will do that for you. It's already done because I provisioned multiple connection on that cluster, but otherwise it will do it for you if you have the rights.
So question for on the change feed piece. You're hosting, so the compute that hosts that change feed, I'm guessing using the underlying change feed processor, is hosted on the Kusto or your services compute. What about, are you doing a pull model here or push model with?
We're doing the pull model. So we.
So
I could give you the story of that, but we landed up with the pull model for different reasons. So we're pulling different interval and we're processing that on our side. And you're right, it's hosted in Kusto. It's hosted in what we call the data management service.
Okay, so the lease, you're basically everything is within the service boundary for the leases collection, all that other stuff. So when people are making this connection, pulling this over, it's all seamless.
Yeah, and so there's no one of the things we wanted to avoid is to have like a lease container on the Cosmos DB side, so you don't see any of that. It's all handled on our side.
On your side, got it. Yeah. Okay.
And so it's in this case, I'm going to use the identity of the cluster to connect to Cosmos DB. You could use a user assign. And the last question is, when do you want to start? If you're familiar with change feed, you know that the API allows you to go either from now or from a previous date. Or you have this specific thing where you say, well, take everything from history. So that's what I'm going to do here because I already started to push data in Cosmos DB. So let's do that. And I didn't name my connection. I think that's, let's call it Bixi. BixCC. And let's create that. That should take a few seconds, and this resolution.
And also, in that other screen, it looked like I saw something that says it's only got read-only change feed access. So I'm guessing for the system or user assigned identity, you are also behind the scenes creating an RBAC policy and assigning it rights that just provide read-only change feed on that.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, that the wizard is doing that for you if you, as a user, have the right to the Cosmos DB database. So there are scenarios where you don't own the Cosmos DB database. You'll need to ask an admin to give the rights for the cluster to your Cosmos DB. Otherwise, the form takes care of that.
Got it. So when you're setting this up, that service principal needs to have obviously rights in both so that they can properly configure this thing to give it the minimum level of access to consuming the data.
Yeah, and of course, you can do all of that with automation, with Azure CLI, with ARM template.
Yep.
I'm holding bicep/ARM template. I'm just waiting for us to be available in the federal region so I can pass all the tests for those quick templates.
Send that my way when you're done. By the way, just as an aside, I'm the RP PM for Cosmos, and I create all the ARM and bicep samples, and happy to include that amongst our ever growing list of bicep and ARM samples. So that's a good one to have.
Excellent. Just FYI, the template looks exactly like the form you just saw. It's just in terms of
it's just all in JSON.
Yeah, but it's the same information as you see.
Cool.
So if I come here and I look at the amount of data in my container, and we'll compare that with what I have in Kusto on the other side. So now I'm not used to
just
such a low resolution.
Yeah, just zoom it out. It's
yeah. Okay, 29,000. Oh, I didn't scale it out. Sorry. Let me do that. Let me put some torque on that database. My fault. Manual. Yeah, 400. Wonder why. 30,000. Huh?
That may take a little time.
Yeah. But we should be able to see something on the other side. So this is Kusto, what we call the web UI. So this is the environment you'll use to do queries and to run your analytics, look at graphs and dashboards, because IDX has its own dashboard, which are hosted in Cosmos DB, by the way, as an insight. And the language, as you mentioned, we have our own language called Kusto, or Kusto Query Language, KQL. The basic of the language, like if I give you like a super fast tutorial, you start with a table. So that's a table, big C landing. Then you pipe and you put an operator. In this case, I say I want to know how many columns or how many rows I have in the database. 72,000. No, it seems that Cosmos DB has taken some. Is it right?
Oh, it looks like it's already scaled out. So
yeah, not the notebook. Query. Let me write that query again. Come on. Query. Oh, yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So, and I don't know if I'm in streaming ingestion yet. Yeah, I think I'm still in batching mode. So when you do a backfill, what we call a backfill is that when you take the history of the database, Kusto will notice there's too much records. Instead of streaming it, it's going to batch it. So that's why I think we don't see data coming in. Okay, now we see it. You see every second, you see more data coming in. That's one of the strengths of the service here. We're not stressing it out too much, but if you have a big enough cluster, you can ingest billions of rows per minute if you want to. It's very scalable because it's not a transactional system, so there's no lock mechanism, so it's very scalable in that sense.
Let me ask you this. So, good question. You touched on that with the scaling bits. Is there a way to scale or parallelize this? Like for Cosmos, you can run an instance of change feed processor for every physical partition. Basically, if you have 30,000, like you had 30,000 RU provision for that collection,
I'll have 5 or 6.
You can run 3 instances of change feed processor and run those in parallel because basically it runs on each physical machine and there are physical partitions.
And we do. So we do run multiple agents, as many agents as there are physical partitions.
Got it. So you basically know how many physical partitions there are, and then you scale out to however many it can handle.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. Very nice.
Yeah, we take advantage of that.
Yep.
So again, just showing because I want to introduce the language at the same time that I'm doing the demo. So here I'm again taking a table, pipe, doing a summarize like a group by in SQL. So I summarize, taking a maximum of the timestamp value and looking at the gap between the time now versus the last value, just checking if I'm in real time. So now I got 3 seconds before the last thing inserted in the value of now, and now we're at 2000, so it's still growing. So sampling, let's look at the data. So now it has landed in the ADX. So this is how the data looks after having been mapped. So I got the start date over here, and you notice it's no longer in in an integer format. I transformed it into datetime format. You alluded to that. ADX is a time series database, and it's optimized to play with dates and does special optimization with datetime. Plus, it's easier to read than an integer for me anyway. So I transformed the start date there. Same thing for the end date. Is member. You see the trace is a JSON format. Is deleted. I'm actually not using is deleted in this thing, but just alluding to if you want to use, and we can talk about that. If you delete documents, how do you handle that in ADX? And we would suggest strongly to use the pattern that you have in ADX in Cosmos DB with the soft delete property. And then I got the ID partition timestamp. And again, the timestamp, I'm doing it both in native format of Cosmos DB, and I transform it in datetime to use the optimization of ADX. I find that useful personally if I want to double check something with Cosmos DB. I have the right thing here. I don't need to transform it, so I ingested that.
Yeah, I don't. Most people can't read epic time and make sense of that. If you can't,
yeah, it takes a while too.
Yeah, right. There's something wrong there. Yeah. Question from a viewer here. Not really related. I'm still waiting to see data ADX with Synapse Link. Data Explorer relationships. Like, I'm not quite sure what you mean. If that's Data Explorer for Cosmos or Azure Data Explorer for what you guys are with Synapse Link.
Yeah, so we so the connection is called Synapse Link. So this data connection I show you is called the Synapse Link from Cosmos DB to Data Explorer. There's Synapse Link between Cosmos DB and Synapse Spark, Synapse SQL on demand. There's Dataverse to SQL pool. So there are different
right, because we could get data. You could also go through Synapse Link and into a Synapse workspace, and then you guys also connect with Synapse itself, right? So it's also isn't that true? Can you go from that way?
Yeah, so so Data Explorer is available on Azure Synapse right now, but this connection isn't there yet.
Okay,
so it's something we're working on. But yeah, we exist in the Synapse workspace as a Data Explorer pool. Here I'm gonna look at the ingestion in time. So something fun that you can do with KQL is you can actually render. So not only can you compute stuff, here I'm doing a summarize. So I'm counting the number of rows that I have per bucket of 1 minute of ingestion time. So going quickly here on the KQL. But there, instead of just looking at it as a table, I'm going to render that as a time chart. So I'm going to look basically at how much ingestion did I do. So you see that here we were low scale, so 27,000 because Cosmos DB was not scaled out. And then we scaled out and boom, that's the...
Two of my favorite functions there is your datetime bin and render time chart. I use that almost daily. I use those two functions when I'm running Kusto queries. So, yep.
So that's something nice, if you want to troubleshoot what's going on. Now I'm going to do some analytics. So I'm going to use another table. So that's something nice you can do with analytics. You can reference table. It's a bit harder to do with Cosmos DB itself. But in ADX, you can have multiple tables. We even have external tables. So you can point to a SQL database. You can point to Cosmos DB. Actually, we have a plugin for Cosmos DB if you want to connect to Cosmos DB directly, or you can connect to the data lake and connect to a table on the data lake. But here we're just using a normal Kusto table where I loaded a couple of data, and it's not there. So my demo will not work. Okay. Crunch. Yeah, I deleted the data. Okay, demo time. How do I fix that quickly? Pixie Station, that's not there. I don't think I have the data anywhere. Okay. That's awful. Okay.
Well, we can talk about it too. That's just the beauty of a live show, Vincent. And you are not the first. We've had plenty of guests who have the demo gods have
failing them.
Yeah, failed them. So
actually, you know what? I'm gonna try to recover, but not guaranteeing.
This is good. Like, hey, this is
you like
this is my show. There's no
hubris.
It's just you and me and all these people watching. So no worries. Maybe your recovery will teach us something, which actually is something that was kind of something that happened a few weeks ago. Actually, well, I guess a month or two ago. So
yeah, I'm going to call it Pixie Stations. I'm going to try to ingest that data if I can find it. That's my challenge. I have to find it back in the blob storage. One time, select container. No, I'll need the URL. So let me do that here. So sorry about that.
No, look at even our viewers are reading for you. So Sergey here says, "Long live troubleshooting." So there you go. So everybody's bought in now, right? We're all vested in watching your recovery here. So it's all it's all good.
So what I'm showing you here is the ingestion wizard. So if you want to do a quick ingestion, you can go to that wizard, and as you see, it asks you where do you want to ingest from. From a file, you can ingest from your laptop, from Event Hub, from and soon from Cosmos DB. And once we have Cosmos DB here, so on the other screen, I have my Storage Explorer, and I'll find if I'm lucky, I'll find my storage account and my data. So I got this data loaded. It's in Parquet files, I think, somewhere.
You know,
So I
one of
can
my
show you
favorite
what's
little things. I don't use the ADX too much. I'm actually more into the Kusto desktop client. But I love taking like Excel files and just ingesting them because it's so much easier doing queries or just more powerful, frankly. Just doing queries on data that sits in big old Excels and then throw them into Kusto, and then you can do all kinds of stuff with them. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Will I find this thing? Oh, is it in data?
That's all right. Well, you were looking for your thing here. I'll share some very fun links for folks here. So you guys have a getting started page out on your docs there. So if people want to get started in using this new connector between Cosmos and ADX, you can go right here, aka ms/adx.cosmos. That's a good place to get started. I'm guessing you're getting started or quick start for that there as well. Some docs here just for Kusto itself. You know what? One of my favorite docs is, I wonder if I've got this up somewhere. You know, like I'm an old, well, I'm old, yes, but I'm an old SQL guy. I mean, I've been using SQL since the Sybase days, I guess, to really make myself feel old. This is one of my favorite docs of all time. It's learnmicrosoft.com. I'm just going to throw the whole thing in there. But this one right here, I'll throw that up and just leave that up. But I love this one because what it does, it allows me to use T-SQL and then figure out what is the equivalent for a Kusto query in there. So I love this cheat sheet. In fact, I keep it up all the time when I'm writing new queries because it's just, well, first of all, I don't memorize anything. Like I use Google for everything, right? That's my reference material or my reference book. But this one here is definitely one that I keep bookmarked because it's just, I find it invaluable, right? Like when I first started using Kusto, it was hard to kind of wrap my head around that query language, and just things were just different, right? It's like moving your cheese. So this always provided kind of an easy way for me to figure out, okay, I know what I want to do from a SQL perspective or from a SQL query language perspective. How do I do the functional equivalent of that writing a Kusto query in there? So anyway, folks, if you're like me and you've got, I don't know, days or weeks or years or decades in writing Transact SQL, and you want to learn the query language for Kusto, this is a really great little cheat sheet for helping you get there. It'll definitely reduce kind of the on-ramp for this thing instead of just poking around through Kusto docs within there. Although I suggest you do keep these up as well. Where is it? The Kusto docs here, because they obviously have a full reference for their query language in there that you'll really enjoy. So other good stuff in there. Hopefully, it looks like Vincent's got his. You got some stuff ingesting there. I'll show a couple other things you got here. A whole YouTube channel of videos. What kind of videos you guys got up on your YouTube channel?
Lots of tutorials and some business cases. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good. So customer evidence, watch customers talk about their stories using ADX. And then, of course, how-to videos, always good. That's our YouTube channel as well. We primarily do the same thing, as well as this show, which is probably not as useful as some of those other things in there. You guys also, tech blogs, is this out on the whole big tech communities site out there? Is that where you guys do your blogs?
Yeah, with our great behind-the-scene editor, as we all learn to love.
Yeah, right. I think I know who you're
Yeah,
talking
and
about.
we put lots of news and tutorials, news bit every time we have a link or when we have new tutorials or new content like learning material, we put it there.
Good. So, do you guys announce new features and new other things through your tech blog there, or?
Yeah, so probably the last one you'll see is probably Cosmos DB or the one before that.
Okay.
And for some reason, this thing doesn't seem to want to ingest, so I think I'll give
Oh
up on
no.
that.
Oh, I see. It's just spitting there.
Yeah, there was probably something wrong because I'm doing a demo, which I'll probably realize the minute I hang up after that.
That happened
So
one time too. Actually, I had a show and the guest just could not get past one step in there that basically prevented the rest of the query and the show from working. And we ended up kind of closing the show early. And then, like 5 seconds after the show stopped, they're like, "Oh no, I figured it out." So
yeah.
like, okay, you know what? Come on back on. We'll do it again. And sure enough,
Oh
they were
yeah.
doing
Oh,
it again.
okay.
So hey, you know what? This does just give you another opportunity to come on back sometime and
Yeah.
show more stuff. So
But I can keep going. I'll
yeah,
talk
let's
through it, and I
talk
think
through it.
there's few queries that we'll be able to run, so I'll show you those. So what I
Okay.
wanted to show is that I can join to another table. So here I've shown you that there's about 2,000 bike stations in there. You can actually plot them on a map, which is quite nice, and you could have looked at the map of Montreal with all the bike stations. But here, what we can do is, again, I showed you the ingestion over time. This is the activity over time. So that's more like if I was the business of Big C, this is how it would look for me. So this is the activity I had. That's in 2014 when they launched the service, and you can see that slowly grow. So you can, start looking at that, and then you can dive in. Typically, that's what you'll do at Kusto. You start with a very general query, and you say, okay, there's something funny going on here. Is it a weekend, or is it something? Then you can dive in and refine your query to find something. Here, I think I was trying, yeah, I think this one will run. So I'm looking at different stations. So I see that, for instance, here I'm trying not only to see the activity over time, but saying what stations are generating the most activity. And I see, okay, it's station 6,184. I don't know what that is. So then I would join with the other table and get the name, which is a subway station, a very popular subway station downtown. And same thing, so you can go and do a top 10. So find me the best bike station. So as an owner of the business, that's the kind of insight you would like to see. And again, here, instead of going into a partition and looking for user data, we're aggregating over large scale data and find the answer very quickly. Something I can look at. So we noticed there was a field is member. So that's one of the very few fields because that's a public data set. So you can imagine the company didn't want to share anything private. So the only thing they shared is if the transaction done by a member of the service, or is it somebody just ad hoc comes with his credit card, picks a bike and return it. So you can ask the question, are members renting more? So what I do, I summarize the number of rows by is member. So looking, are members doing more activities? Yes, they are. So it's 1.2 million versus just under 200,000.
I just want to point out that's a million point three, 1.3 million, 1.4 million rows, and you just ran a query over them in 1.5 seconds. So
Yeah,
that's pretty good stuff.
on the smallest cluster available.
On a 2 node cluster, basically, right? Or
One
two
node.
B, 1 node. And
Well, yeah,
okay,
it's a dev cluster, so one node, one ingest node, one query node, and that's it.
that's pretty good.
So here I could ask, okay, is the duration, so the distance and time between the end and the start, is it longer for member or not? And if I run that, you would think that since the members are more popular, they probably run for longer. But actually, it's the other way around. So casual users are using the service for longer. So that the average time that they use it is longer. What about the distance? For that, I would need the Big C station. You would see that this distance is surprisingly close, so I cannot run that because I don't have my Big C station table. Um, Now, let's look at the column of tracing, trace. So if I go back to, so that's, when we talked about the fact that I had one of the column was populated by JSON.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take one at random. I took the first one, but I don't need to take the first one. You can take anyone. Okay, there's no trace in that case. Okay, if you have no traces. Okay. So that's random data. As you can see, it's like a random string, and it's a random number of traces as well. So I'll do an analytic query on that just to prove that I can do it. Oops, so from here to here. So if I'm looking for that one, I can run it and say, okay, find the big C landing row where the trace has that string in it. And it returns me this one that has an ID 62D4. Hopefully that should be the same one, 62D4. There you go. So you
I
see
get a
that
question for you,
yep.
feature-wise, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Postgres has this JSON-B data type. They can actually do actual queries into JSON, like they actually crack open the JSON and then index it in there. Are you guys considering anything like that for JSON within Kusto or
So you mean doing like a rich query inside the JSON, like
basically cracking the JSON and then building indexes on the data within it, so you can do basically direct rich queries on it.
So the JSON is indexed, so that's why I got this query returned so fast. It's because it's indexed, but it's indexed kind of as a string. So that's why I was able to find a string in there, but I couldn't do a query like find me the second member that has that type of pattern. Like I cannot do that type of rich query like you can do in Cosmos DB, for instance.
Right, where you're basically either filtering, the filter predicate is calling a named attribute or property, and or projecting out from within there as well.
Exactly. Actually, you can do it, but you won't be using the indexes anymore. So if you do that, usually what we suggest is try to extract at ingestion time, try to extract some data you can put in a column, so you can filter with those. And then you can, if you have a data set of like 10,000 or 20,000 rows, then you can go in and do whatever you want. Because you can do that. You can dot yourself into an array or a JSON.
Apparently, cracking the JSON is humorous to someone in here. So
Grace conference thought.
That sounds like I don't know what kind of conference that is, but it's not the ones I'm talking at. So okay.
So the next one here, I'm trying to find the average. So if we look again at this, you notice that not all documents had trace and some had more than others. So here I'm just looking at the average of length of that value. So again, you can do that very efficiently because there's
oh, that's so cool.
There's
such a fast query.
Yeah. For analytics, it's very fast. And the model for ADX is to do ad hoc queries. And sometimes people don't understand what we mean by that. Is that as opposed to where you do a data warehouse pattern where you prepare your data for visualization, typically ADX will be used as telemetry data where you want to explore your data, as the name suggests.
This is exactly how I use it and exactly how lots of product managers in Azure use it. Like I said, we use Kusto to store all the customer telemetry, and I use it, and other people use it frequently to kind of get insights into customer usage patterns, just like you were doing there, which is, hey, do members rent longer than non-members? I do the same exact thing, and so do many, many others. Like if I'm trying to answer questions about what are the patterns of usage and the behavior for customers for doing things within there, all that data, nearly all of it's all within our Kusto clusters. It's just a matter of kind of just exploring it, if you will, and kind of spelunking through that data and saying, hey, if I look at the data this way, what do I see? Or versus that, what do I see? And then you get really nice visualization capabilities in there, whether it's time chart or all these other graphs that you've got in there. It's an awesome tool for doing just exactly what you're saying, which is I just want to build some ad hoc queries and just kind of run them and just see what comes out the other end in there. Rather than that formalized analytics where I'm building a workbook or a notebook in a workspace and I'm doing that, or something else where I'm
building a cube in advance
and then staging that and then showing that and then lighting up a Power BI on it.
Yeah, and that applies, of course, to the business of Azure, but maybe not all the auditors are working for Azure, but it applies to every business when you look at it. New businesses, when you do like a digital transformation, you automate a bunch of processes, and you have logs or telemetry about what's going on. If it's IoT devices on your trucks for delivery, or if it's servers for your e-commerce site, and then you want to understand the behaviors of your customer. Where is the business? Where are the hurdles? Where are your customers struggling? And it's all by analyzing telemetry that you get that.
Yeah.
So something else I could do. So here I calculated an average by member, and it is the same, and that's because I generated the data and I didn't look at his members. So of course, it's the same given an error. Here, what I'm going to do is doing an MV expand. So taking the data and MV expanding the trace. So if I come back maybe to look at the data for everybody to understand what I'm doing. So here I'm taking 10. So the column trace has this array, and here I'm going to do an MV expand. So what MV expand does, it takes for granted that the column is a JSON, but not only JSON, but it's a JSON array, and it'll take every element of the array, and it's going to expand it. So it's going to be one row per element, and I'm going to take the first 100 of those. So if I do that, then my trace column is no longer an array, but it's now a single node, a single JSON node. And I can even expand it like this. And I could go a bit further and say, okay, I'm going to take the name and the status and extract it. So I just dot my way through it. So that's what I was saying, that you can actually do a rich query. It's just that you won't be leveraging the indexes if you do that. Actually, you will if you do that at the root level, but if you enter the array, you won't do that anymore.
Okay.
So here, that's what I'm doing. I'm extracting that and taking the first 10, and basically I should have, I have my trace name here and trace status. And here I'm doing that ad hoc on the data, but I could actually do that at ingestion time. And that's something I did here with the Bixby flatten table. I ingested the data. The data is coming in my Bixby landing, and then there's something called an update policy. It's like a mini ETL running inside Kusto that transforms the data and pushes it to another table called Bixby flatten. So I can do it on the fly if it's too long, or if I want to do query where I want to do something special within the array, then I can do that on that table.
I get it. So I've used the materialized keyword sometimes when I've got really massive data sets that I put into like a let or into a variable, so to speak, and then I do that later. How would I? So how you say I could make a table out of that if I wanted to? How do I do that? Can you show me real quick? Like, say, could I take Bixby flatten there, take 10, and then shove that into a new table?
Yes. Oh, if you want to just ad hoc taking a new table, that you can do for sure. Let's say, let's call it set. Is it set table or set directly the name? Let's say set table Bixby flatten this query. Yeah. Maybe I don't need the table keyword. I think I don't need that. Boom. So now I created one table called temp table. And don't know why it doesn't recognize it. But if I take 10 of those, should be able to see it. So now I ingested inside a table. It's called like a direct ingestion. I didn't pass by the ingestion service, but I took thing, and I could have transformed the data here. So that's what I'm doing.
Cool stuff.
But if I want to show, maybe I'll show you afterwards how I built all that stuff. I'll just finish. Let's see. Not this one. I wanted to show you. Okay, so one of the consequences of ingesting the change feed is that we are not a replica of what's in Cosmos DB exactly. If you have something like IoT, it probably is going to end up being that way. But if you have documents that you update, we're going to have the original document, then the update version, then the next update version, etc., etc. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want to do analytics on the latest state of your data, which corresponds to what you have in Cosmos DB.
Oh, so you do append only?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
So in this case, what you would do, let's find the document for that. Let's find, well, we're already here. Another document. Let's find this one. Okay, so I'll find this document. So I'm looking at the table. Actually, let's look at the landing table. And okay, I have one document. That's fine. Now, if I come back here and I do an edit, I'll change the start station by 42, my favorite number. For those who've seen, read some British humor. If I do that, I should have 2 rows now. Okay, so very quickly, it's already in ADX. And if I do it again, let's say 43, I should have a 3rd row. Okay, beat it to the punch. Okay.
So if you're an append only, if you're handling this as append only, should users be designing their data to have versions, document versions in there, so that they are pulling the most recent version?
Either the document version, or you can use a timestamp, which is what I'm doing here. So here I'm saying, let's
I
find.
see. Getting the max timestamp on that. Okay. Got it. Yeah. That's yeah. And since you guys are
because Cosmos DB
time,
stamps the timestamp all the time, then we can leverage that.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But it could work with version as well. So in this case, I'm saying,
I mean, you guys are organized. You guys are optimized around time, so that's not expensive to just include in there. And I think most people using Kusto are obviously doing things by time, like you said earlier, right? So
yeah. So I wanted to show that. So if you have that pattern, and we have documentation on that specific pattern. The other version, if you can do, if you have a lot of data and you update often, what I would recommend is considering doing a materialized view. So you could actually put this thing inside an object called materialized view, where it's going to materialize that result. So every time there's new data, they're going to recompute the maximum. So you can have a table with the data stored with the latest version only. So I would do that only if you do like tons of updates and it's too long to go through it ad hoc. Then you could use a materializer. It's kind of an optimization.
Right. I mean, if you're building a document version, I mean, the pattern in Cosmos is you have one container that always stores the latest, and then you have another container that's connected via change feed that has all the mutations. So I don't know how you would. I guess you would just do it. You'd need another one that's just an upsert, basically. Because here's the problem: if you did it on the one that you're ingesting on, I don't know how this would work, because you would always get every mutation connected to you guys.
So the pattern is that you have a container where you put all the versions and you keep all the versions.
Well, yeah, that's the way. If you were doing a document version type thing, like say you're an insurance thing or whatever like that, and you need to keep mutations for a policy or whatever. I mean, it's anything where you need to version a document.
So you don't update a document, you insert a new one, and you have like a version property or something.
Correct.
That you increment.
It's always an append only type of store, right? So the way it works is you have one collection or container that always contains the most recent version, and then you have it connect, and then by change feed you connect it to another one that has basically the audit of it, and that includes every time you insert a new version, change feed automatically picks that up and shoves it into the other container, so it always has every version.
Makes sense. So yeah, you could connect to either of those, I suppose, and still do an argmax in Data Explorer. But the thing is that we ingest the change feed, so yeah, you have to. If
you'd always get everyone, I mean, that's fine. I mean, you could just basically do, if you need to do an audit type thing or doing document version, you could just keep all the mutations in Kusto. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, and I see customers going both ways. So some customers want to just do analytics on the current data, and some customers want to look at the changes over time. So it's useful to have both.
Yeah. So quick question, I guess. I'm guessing the answer is yes, but this connector will obviously consume RUs through change feed. So the customer's container will need to accommodate that, obviously, if they're
correct. So that's a great question. I didn't cover that. We did some performance test, actually some load test, if you will. What we witnessed is if you write let's say you write documents for 100 RUs, we're going to read those documents. It's going to cost you about 2 RUs for us to read those documents. So you can see it as a tax on you writing, because if you don't write anything, we won't read anything. We'll read actually, I think it's 2 RUs per physical partition, just to interrogate the.
That's right. So kind of the nominal, or basically at rest, it's going to consume 2 RU a second, just to sit there and pull every second, and then whatever the read cost is for every read that's pulled over. Correct.
Yeah, But the read cost is basically 2 RUs per 100 RUs you use to write. So if you wrote for, let's say, 1,000 RUs, we're going to consume 20 RUs.
Yeah.
So it's not zero, but it's not a huge tax either.
Yeah,
So
it's not right.
Something you should consider. Now I've showed you pretty much what I can show you without having my station. The station was just nice because you could see the map and you could see everything on the map. But otherwise, I showed basically what I wanted to show you. Now I can show you the magic behind the curtain, the rabbit in the hat. A bit more advanced. So that's the commands that you use to create everything I showed you. Basically, I ran that before the meeting, and I don't have the ingestion. That's why I didn't have my my table in there. So this is how you create a table. There's a bunch of wizards to do that if you don't want to do that yourself. Right now, you notice when I created the data connection, I needed a table already existing. In 1 or 2 months, we're going to have this wizard. We call it the experience one click, where you basically point to Cosmos DB. It's going to check the first 100 documents and suggest you a schema. And then you can manipulate the schema. But right now I configured it in advance, so just creating a table.
Yeah.
Then I put the streaming ingestion on, so that allows me to do real-time ingestion. I also configured the ingestion batching policy because when streaming is too much, we fall back on batching, and the default policy is 5 minutes. So if you don't like that, you put something like here, I put 20 seconds. So that's why at the beginning you saw it was a bit slower because it was ingesting by batch because it's more efficient. It was going directly to the column store as well. And here's the mapping. So you were asking, how do you map? So that's a data mapping in Kusto. Again, it's a bit more advanced feature. But this is how it looks like. So you create an object called mapping that you attach to the table Bixby landing, and you map for each column. You map the path in the document. So that's the Cosmos DB document. So $sign is the root. Start date. So that's like going here. Start date, and you map that to the column in Kusto table start date, and you apply a transform date time from Unix milliseconds. So that's what transforms it from this integer representation to date time. And I do the same everywhere. Not much magic happening here. Maybe the only thing unusual is that I map this property twice. So I map the start that underscore TS, the timestamp of Cosmos DB. I map it to underscore TS, and I map it to timestamp, but this time with the transformation. And that's
okay. So yeah, nothing complex there. You're just calling that transformation to. So I'm guessing it figures out the data type for the column. But if you want to do something like go from Epic to ISO 8601, your date time in there, you just use that transform and it just does it for you.
Yeah, so I do it at ingestion time. You could do it on the fly, but as I mentioned, it's more efficient if you ingest with timestamp, because then we do some optimization behind the scene.
Got it.
With that. Showing you how I did the update policy. So that's what I used to flatten the hierarchy. Like I had an array and I flatten it. So this is the function I use. I declared a function. You have functions like you have in Cosmos DB, quite similar actually. So it's something that doesn't mutate the state of your database. It's basically a query. And if you look at it, it's exactly the query I authored in front of you, like doing an MV expand and then going and pick up the name, the status. And then I use that function inside an update policy, which I define on a table called Bixby flatten. I define a policy update. The source is Bixby landing, so it takes data from Bixby landing, pushes it to the Bixby flatten database, running this query, so that function over here. And that's how you do an update policy. So very quickly you can do that. And that pattern can be used to do multiple things. I've seen actually with Cosmos DB, I've seen customer, using the polymorphism pattern in document databases where they have multiple types of documents.
Yep.
And they say, well, I'm not interested to see all of those in ADX, or not all of those in the same table. So what they could do is they can route the data. They can land everything in a JSON format in one table and then route it to different tables, so that different tables will filter out the data that they want.
So how does that work? Do you have to put some kind of filter predicate into there, and then you just basically, hey, if entity type or entity or type or whatever equals this value, go this way? How does that work?
So here I didn't do that, but here I didn't do any filtering, but I could say, where document type, document type equal something. Then that's for my table, and for the other table, I do another predicate. So
Okay.
you can
That
do
is
that. Or
really
you can
cool.
filter out data altogether because you said, well, those documents, I'm not interested in them at all,
Got
so
it.
I'll just filter them out. So you can do that. So anything that's usually what we recommend, well, not recommend, but what you have to do is if you have this like a sample mapping, you just want to take stuff from your JSON document and position it to different columns. You use a data mapping, but as soon as it's a bit complicated, you want to do a bit of transformation, go with an update policy, and then it's pretty much limitless. But you can do any transform you can do in Kusto, you can do there. And dematerialize view, which I didn't show you, but what you could do is define a Bixi latest table where you say it's Bixi landing, where I summarize, I take the argmax for timestamp by ID. So for each ID in my database, give me the latest document according to its timestamp.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's going to materialize that query, and you get it online all the time.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's it for the demo.
Wow, that's really awesome. Like I said, this is it's one of my favorite databases that we've got in Azure, in fact, maybe anywhere. And I use it every day, and it's just awesome seeing these two things connected. I think it's a 1 + 1 = 3 type of equation there, because you really get you can use Cosmos for what it's really great for. Where it's a scale out database, right? So if you need to jam megabytes or hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes a second at a database like that, you can, and then change feed it out and into this, and then run your ad hoc analytics or whatever it is you need to do in there. Yeah, like I said, just I love Kusto.
You guys are already into big data, and that was one of the reasons that's the first database that we have like a native ingestion like that, because you guys are in the same space than us, basically. Like
and we're not an analytics database, right? We're straight up it's an operational database. It is not made for analytics. You cannot run big, fat, heavy queries on us, and we're certainly not time series, and you can't, but you guys are. It's exactly what you are.
And likewise, the other way around, we do concurrency in the hundreds. Like if you have a small cluster, you can do like hundreds of queries in parallel. If you have a bigger cluster, maybe thousands. But like the 10,000 and the 100,000s in parallel, they will leave that to the Cosmos DB of this world.
There you go.
So each have their strength, and they complement each other very well. I think we had a pattern before that if you wanted to ingest like the change feed, but it was not a managed experience. So there was a lot of moving pieces. Monitoring was a bit of a pain. Our customer let us know loud and clear. But I see the value for that. I think like if you have data coming from Event Hub, for instance, and go straight to Cosmos DB, we already support Event Hub, so there's not much value in using this. But I think there's a lot of time where people are transforming their data in an Azure function or something before pushing it to Cosmos DB.
Yep.
Then what
they will typically. Sometimes people are just pointing at a device and shoving raw data into an endpoint to us, but many times they're putting it in front of putting an event hub or something and doing some enrichment in a function and then shoving it into us first. And then off to wherever, whether it's Synapse or to this. Increasingly to go
and then to do that in ADX, and you have to replicate the same logic that you had in the Azure function. So that's not a really good proposition. But with this connection, just flow the data from Cosmos DB to ADX, and as you see, it's just a couple of clicks and you get your data.
Yeah.
So
very cool. This is just awesome, Vincent. I love this. I love this connector. Like I said, this thing is great, and I hope viewers enjoyed it today too. Definitely, plenty of questions from our viewers on this. So, hey, thanks for coming. I want to share just the links again, just so people can catch this. So, get started for this new ADX and Cosmos connector. Definitely come check that out. Also, all the Kusto docs, come and look at it there. And then Detective Agency, I put that up as well.
You found it? Okay, cool.
I did. I found it while you're during the show. I'm almost good at multitasking, but there you go, detective.kusto.io. By the way, that's a pretty tough little thing there. Like I quickly realized that I didn't know the answer to some of these things in here.
Yeah, they're not true. The first one is easy, but it gets harder very fast. Like
it gets harder fast.
No, I was surprised myself because it's a colleague of mine, actually colleagues of mine who authored that, and I thought it would be like a breeze to go through.
Dude, I even tried Googling answers for this thing, and I'm like, okay, I give up. I don't know. I can't figure out what's going on here. So, but yeah, so check that out. That's a fun little experience for you. Start for free. You can't use the connector with this thing, but you can go and get a single instance cluster. Definitely go and do this because it's free forever for the life.
Free 100 gigabytes of data, up to 10 databases, and soon, maybe in 2 months, you'll have the Cosmos DB connected.
Okay, that sounds cool. And then, but a great place to get started in there. Also, their blog, you'll find the announcement for the Cosmos connector in there, and then lots of other stuff, I'm sure. Their YouTube channel, come and check it out. Lots of how-to videos and
in 2 weeks should have an how-to video, but that's basically what we went through. But
cool. Yeah. And then also this one I showed that I do not have I don't have a short link for, but my favorite page, I keep this on my favorites bar, and I refer to it quite frequently when I'm writing new queries, for the ones that I've already got, but for the ones when I'm trying to write something new and I haven't quite memorized all the syntax. In fact, why would you, right? So Google is your friend, but if you don't know what you're Googling for, it's not going to help. So use the cheat sheet. I'll leave it up there for just a second longer. If you're a SQL head like me and you're wanting to learn the new Kusto language, very, very powerful. This is your friend there. So I see a comment up here. Just a nice comment here. It says nice.
Thank you, Dennis.
Agreed. So cool. Well, hey, here, I'll put us back up on here. I remember I just had us full screen there, so people are just looking at an empty screen there. But Vincent, so good to have you on the show. What a great way to start off the new year, showing off my two favorite databases side by side. I hope you folks at home enjoyed this. Just some quick announcements. Hey, we run a monthly Cosmos DB user group. Come and check us out. Always cool new content from the community and others. Come and join, mingle with the other community members, and hopefully we'll see you there. This is episode 68. Can't believe I've done 68 of these things. So come check out all other 67 episodes. I actually invited people last fall to come and binge watch all of our episodes over the holidays. Rather than doing Netflix, you can do Cosmos DB live and chill.
Nice activity with the family.
Yeah, great way to spend time with the family, right? So why put on Disney Plus? You can just watch my show over and over and over again. That's it for us this week, folks. Next week, we're going to have the Entity Framework folks back on. I haven't had them on for quite some time, maybe just over a year. We're going to go and meet with that team again. There's a new PM on that team I'll introduce you to, and we'll also have one of the dev leads for Entity Framework. So we'll just talk about Entity Framework. I think we're going to try to make this episode more about a discussion about using Entity Framework with Cosmos DB. Want to get your questions, your thoughts on this. We'll show you latest and greatest on that as well. Anyway, we'll hope you join us for that. That is going to be January 26th. So in 2 weeks, we'll have that episode. So till then, Vincent, thank you so much for joining us. It was really great having you on. This was a really fun show. I haven't had this much fun in a long time. So
great. It was nice to be here. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.